Me? Nikki, you know what? You gonna quit doing the shade. That's the third. What happened? Our phone. You live, Nikki?
Yeah.
Yo, what's up?
Hey everyone.
What's up? Good.
We are going live. Your inspiration health. We're day early because Damien.
I'm probably next to picture situation. Hiccup
I
Carl.
was trying to think of something really shady to say about Damien. That's why we have to go live.
Carl.
Carl
Is
is
it
in the
not-
wrong. We got Mike right here. Let's scoot this over just a little bit. Okay. Hey Willie.
Is it running?
No. I was just about to tell
Ready?
you.
Okay,
You're
we're ready. Yeah, we're ready.
When I point to you, you're on, okay?
Okay.
All right. And for the record, your hair looks lovely.
I told her.
I did not get to wash my wig and I refuse.
I don't know that you should make public statements about wig washing.
It's a normal thing now. Women don't wear their real hair.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Sorry.
Then somebody's not rubbing their girlfriend's head.
See, you see from the Christian gospel radio
Let's go.
station. That's how we.
All right, we are live. Yes. All right. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Your Inspiration Health 103.1, sponsored by Mercy Health Physicians. We are talking about Mental Health Awareness Month. We got Damian Hoskins, Kurt
morning.
Billups.
What's up?
Good
What's
morning.
up? What's up?
Let's just go ahead and chime in on this. Let's talk about mental health as it relates to our community.
So last week when we talked, we tend whenever we have these kinds of conversations, we tend to look at it from the perspective of non-compliance. What we don't do, what we're not doing. My question this morning, and Kurt and I was talking about this. My question this morning is, what would happen, or what does happen, when you actually do find that you're in a place of depression, a place of struggle, mental, behavioral, emotional, and you do make the steps to seek clinical help, to seek a therapist, to seek counseling? What happens? What are the results of that? I can tell you personally that I had, I grew up and I've shared, a lot of my life has been pretty transparent these days, but
Yeah.
I shared with the team, with you all. I was abused as a kid. That's not uncommon. That happens to a lot of people.
Wow.
When I got older, I had a fairly, not too long ago, I had a fairly traumatic experience, loss. You know what I'm saying? You go through a divorce, you have loss, right?
Right.
The experience that I had, as a kid, the traumatic, abuse experience I had was with my mother. Now, ironically, the only person, there were two people that helped me through that loss period.
Right.
My mother
Yeah.
and a therapist. Now, how that happened though was so interesting because I realized the difficulty, the weight, and Kurt, you can relate to this. So it was the weight of having, because the divorce that I went through caught me off guard,
Right.
completely off guard, and I didn't see it coming.
Right.
Then you go through that, and then you don't realize who you have in your corner to lean on.
Right.
I certainly didn't think that the person that I would have in my corner to lean on was my mother because I had a traumatic experience growing up.
Right.
My mother recommended that she and I go to counseling
Therapist
together.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Imagine the impact and the import of having your mother, a person that you had a disconnected, estranged, difficult, traumatic relationship with, recommending that you go seek professional help, professional counseling with her.
Right.
And how that whole thing transpired helped me get to a completely different level of healing. So I went from trauma to tragedy to therapy, and then hit this process of building capacity towards healing.
Right. First of all, man, Damien and I've become pretty well acquainted in the last couple of years, and I consider you a friend. And so, I want to commend you on your transparency, straight up. And I look at you as a man to man, and tell you I appreciate that, and I respect that. And it takes a certain awareness to be able to do that, and I think that's probably part of the reason you've identified or so readily to identify when things aren't right.
Right.
And then not only so willing to identify, but also willing to seek out the necessary professional help
That's right.
that you may need
Yeah.
to seek out
Yeah.
if something gets too heavy
Yeah.
on the mind. So I appreciate that, and I get it. You're right. Like, you know, we all have things that we're going to go through,
Yeah.
right? We all deal with things, and just like you talked about with your situation, I shared a very similar situation. You know, the same time I was losing my mother, I was losing my wife.
Right.
And so this was all happening at the same time. And so how we cope and how we deal with stress on an individual level can vary and it can differ.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that one person's weaker, one person's stronger, because their coping mechanism probably puts them in a much more compromised position than somebody else. It just means that the person that's making the poor choices or the choices that may hurt them probably need to think about trying a different route
Right.
to heal, trying a different route to be made whole again.
Right.
And so, but when I was thinking about, as you were talking, a lot was going on in my head, but one of the things that was jumping out at me is the stigma around mental health. You know, there's even doctors that will encourage you strongly not to even use the word mental health, but to use behavioral health, because it's less a stigma around the word behavioral than there is around the word mental. And so when you think about the people that, because we all deal with something at some point, at some time in life,
It's tragic, yes.
how much of a hindrance to seeking professional help or to talking to someone or to saying, hey, I need to face this thing, how much of that stigma prevents people in your mind from taking the necessary steps to fix it? And that's a question I posed to both you and Nikki, because Nikki's not exempt. Nobody is exempt from this conversation in the sense that we all have to deal with something at some point. So how does that stigma in you guys' mind hinder people from stepping up and stepping out and calling it out and saying, I probably need to see somebody?
I think it's part of your relationship. You have to get to the root of your problem when it comes to mental health. You know, being able to actually face what really is going on with you.
Right.
And a lot of times we rather push it away, you know, especially when it comes to like death, divorce, things such as that, loss. You know, we want to put on this, I'm still me, I still do what I'm doing. But instead of taking that time out to say, okay, this hurts, you know, whether you write things down, whether you write it out, whether you have someone that you can talk to that's not a psychiatrist, you know, a psychologist, but a person that you can really sit down with no judgment. But it's you and your accountability first, you know. Are you willing to recognize the fact that there's a problem?
Right.
Now, I will chime in because you're right, I'm not exempt. I actually went through some, and I shared this with you guys a while ago, some depression a few months ago, back in November and December.
Yeah.
I got diagnosed actually with depression and anxiety. And I was kind of laughing it off like, who, me? No, not her. No, yes. I knew something was wrong. I had some hurt and some issues going on, but I was willing to take accountability for it and say, okay, I'm gonna go talk to somebody. I knew I didn't want medication. It was, hey, I went to my doctor first, you know, and said, this is how I'm feeling. And it's okay to say how you feel. It doesn't make me any different from anybody else. It doesn't make me less of a woman, less of nothing. I feel good because I was willing to stand up and say, look, I got a problem. I don't care that this office knows who I am. Listen, I need to take that depression test, which is a PHQ-2. That's the first two questions that you start off with when you're trying to figure out if a person has depression or anxiety. So that's one thing people do need to know actually when you go to your doctor's office. You are required actually now to take that.
That's
whether
a
you're
PH.
It's called a PHQ-2.
Wow.
And that is whether you put on the schedule that you're dealing with depression or not. Because a lot of times we don't want to be honest when we're making appointments. We don't want everybody to know.
Right.
You know,
It's stigma.
what's
It's
going
the
on.
stigma.
Yeah.
Is that the stigma?
You don't want nobody to know.
That's right.
So, you know, then it's, I'm going to save it. And then you come in and then one day you're falling out.
Yeah.
So listen, this is why, and so the stigma is real, and it has been real, particularly in our community for quite some time, because we're sort of a closed knit community, and a lot of times, you know, you grow up and you have that message in your house that family business stays in the house, right? And it's not something that you transparently share. The reality, though, is if you look at it from a Christian standpoint, these are testimonies.
But your testimony can help somebody
That's the
else.
point that I'm
And
making.
that's why we really
That's
have
the
to
point
get out of
that I'm
that.
making.
Some things, yes, it stays in the
It's
house.
a-
Certain
some-
things.
yes.
Yeah.
But when it comes to that, I feel better.
We don't
when
have
I
to
talk
get
you.
so much
Yeah.
in depth about, you don't have to get in the weeds about the nature of things and so on and so forth. But I remember, Kurt, you had a relationship with Sister Kathy Green from Mercy Health. She
Yeah.
recently
It's
passed.
a beautiful woman.
Beautiful woman. She shared with me, okay, I talked to her when I first met her, and I've shared this before, but I talked to her when I first met her, and she counseled me on the issues that were plaguing me in my life, my mental behavioral health issues, right? I was going through some stuff. She counseled me, and she was going through terminal cancer while she was counseling me.
Right.
Okay. When I found out she was going through terminal cancer, and I talked to her about it, I was like, how are you helping me when you're at death's door?
Right.
She literally told me, and I will never forget this. She said, listen, everybody has a cross to bear. And it speaks to that testimony. Everybody has a cross to bear. As Christians, as God's children, sometimes it's our job to help them lift up the heavy end of their cross.